So we are subtracting integers, and remember, you are always adding. You're either adding units to the right or adding units to the left. So keep that in mind throughout the lesson. You're always adding. So this first one says 4 minus 6. You can rewrite that as 4 plus negative 6. So remember, if you have a plus sign, whenever you have two signs next to each other, you can write it using parentheses. So if you have a plus sign and then a negative sign, if you distribute that plus sign into the negative sign, a positive times a negative is a negative. So you can just rewrite it with one sign using the minus sign. But it's also good to just put the plus sign because you can easily understand what's going on. So if you put the plus sign, since you're always adding units to the left or to the right, it's kind of easier to understand when you have that plus sign in the middle. So in this case, you will start at positive 4. And then you will go to the left, you will add units to the left 6 times. So if you put up 4 fingers and try to take away 6, you don't have 6 fingers to take away, so that tells you your answer is going to be a negative number. So you will start here at 4 and you would go to the left 6 units. So it's going to take you 4 units to get to 0. And then it'll take you 2 additional units, which means the answer is going to take you to negative 2. So that means 4 minus 6 is negative 2. So that's just a little review of what we did last week. For this one right here, we need to start at what number? We need to start at negative 2. And then we can rewrite this, right? Because we have that negative times that negative. Remember, parentheses is multiplication. So before we go any further with this one, we want to rewrite it. A negative times a negative equals what? A positive. Don't that look like a plus sign? Look at that. You can just change that into a plus sign. So whenever you have a negative times a negative or 2 negative signs together and you're adding or subtracting, you want to just rewrite it as one sign. So we can rewrite this as, look at that, just change it to a plus sign. It looks like a plus sign. If you make that curved parenthesis straight and then you put those 2 lines straight, it looks like a plus sign. So you have negative 2 plus 5. So if you start at negative 2, or just start at negative 2, and then you go to the right 5 units, it's going to take you 2 units to get to 0. That's plus 2. And then you can go, you need to add 3 more units. So that's how you end up at positive 3, which is 3 units to the right of 0. So you know it'll be a positive number. Okay. So let's look at some examples. So we want to find each difference. We want to find each difference. So we're starting at negative 7, and then we want to distribute this minus sign into this plus sign. So you can think of it as saying, what is negative 7 plus the opposite of negative 3? So that's really how you can think about this. You always want to have that plus sign. But this is too many signs, so we can just rewrite it as, what is the opposite of negative 3? The opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. So we can rewrite this as negative 7 plus 3. And of course, negative 7 plus 3 is going to end us at negative what? 4. Negative 4. So if you start at negative 7 and then you add the opposite of negative 3, which is positive 3, you will end up at negative 4. So the answer is negative 4. Then we have 8 minus 4. If we wanted to rewrite this, we can rewrite it as 8 plus negative 4, but that's kind of unnecessary for this one because this is the normal problem that you saw probably in first grade or kindergarten. So 8 minus 4 is just 4. It's 5. How can we rewrite this with a plus sign? You will write 2 plus negative 5, just like that. So you will start at negative 2, and then you will add units to the left. So this minus sign says you go to the left 5 times. So you can think of it like that, or you can just put up 2 fingers and try to take away 5. And then you know your answer should be a negative number. So if we start at negative 2 and go to the left, in 2 units we're going to be at 0. So our number, our final answer is going to end up to the left of 0, meaning it should be negative. So if you remember what we learned the other day, since we have different signs, we subtract. Different signs, you find a difference. So we want to subtract the absolute value. So we have the absolute value of -5, which equals 5. And then the absolute value of 2, which equals 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. So we know our answer is either going to be +3 or -3. And you get the sign from the one that's greater in absolute value. So since -5 is greater in absolute value, I'm going to keep the negative sign for my final answer. So it's going to be -3. And that's the answer for that one. Now this next one says -6 minus 1. So you could think of it as if you're in debt $6, that's represented by -6. Debt of $6 is -6. You want to, and then you add more debt, so or you go in a negative direction, one more unit, you're going to end up at -7. So the answer is -7. Now if you rewrite this as -6 plus -1, you can kind of understand what's going on here. -6 plus -1. So you will start at -6 and add units. Add units which way? To the left, because going to the left is negative. Going to the left one time. And that's how you'll end up with -7. So the answer is -7. So you $6 in debt, and then you add more debt. Now when you go to 7th grade, you're going to need to know that you can rewrite this as this, as with 2 signs. All right, moving on. Evaluate the following. 17 minus, remember these 2 lines mean absolute value, minus the absolute value of 7 times -3. So 7 times -3 is equal to, remember, 7 times 3 is 21, but you're not just talking about 7 times 3, you're talking about the opposite of that. So the opposite of 21 is -21, and you want to put that in absolute value. And remember, absolute value is distance away from 0. And since absolute value is distance away from 0, we can put that as a positive number because it's 21 units away from 0. So this will just be 21. And then we want to bring down that minus sign. We want to bring down 17. And then we have 17 minus 21. And that's going to give us a negative number, which is -4. So since we have different signs, 17 is positive and 21 is negative because we have a minus sign in front of it, we can find the difference using the absolute value. So the absolute value of -21 is equal to 21, and the absolute value of 17 is equal to 17. So we find the difference, which is going to be 4. So we have to decide, is our final answer going to be +4 or is our final answer going to be -4? So we would say -4 because -21 is greater in absolute value, so it's going to take over when it comes to the final answer. So our final answer is going to be -4 instead of +4 here. And we can kind of think about this as a bracket. So we want to evaluate everything inside of those absolute value first. So we have, in the order operations, multiplication. Remember, parentheses is multiplication, so this is actually 7 times -3. We want to evaluate that first before we subtract because it's parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division from left to right, then addition and subtraction from left to right. So we want to keep this in absolute value. We have 7 times -3. A positive times a negative is going to give us -21, right? And then we bring down -44. And then we have -21 plus -44. So they have the same sign, so we add the absolute values, keep the sign. And that's going to give us -65. And I want to keep those absolute value lines. And then I'm going to take the absolute value of -65 is just 65 because it's 65 units away from 0. And then I'm going to bring down my minus sign, which came from here, my minus and my 5 because I did not use that. And then I'm going to bring down my +16, which came from here. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing in the order operations, which is addition and subtraction from left to right. So 16 plus 65 must go first. And that's going to give me 81. And then I'm going to take away 5 from that. And that's going to give me 76, which is going to be answer choice A. Then I'm going to move on to the All right, so these are some questions for you to answer on your own. So from 6.NS.C.7c, these are some questions that you really want to focus on to prepare for your test. Which describes the distance between -2 and 0? What is the distance between -2 and 0? You want to think about that first. The distance is 2 5/10. Remember, distance is space, so it's never going to be a negative number. So we're looking for the value that's equivalent to 2 5/10. So A is not equivalent to 2 5/10. It says -1. First, it's a negative number. Then we have the absolute value of that, which is still not a whole number, 2 5/10. Eliminate. And then we have 2 minus the absolute value of 2 minus 5/10. That'll give us 1 5/10, which is not equivalent to 2 5/10. And then we have D, which is the correct answer. The absolute value of -2 5/10 is 2 5/10. So since distance is since absolute value is distance from 0, when you see a question asking about distance, you kind of want to think about absolute value. Number 2, it says Teresa measured the depths. So depths, you have to know what that means. Depths of some objects in the ocean. If a depth was below sea level, she recorded it as a negative number. If the depth was above sea level, she recorded it as a positive number. So we have some objects here, and then we have depths. So the question says, which of the objects is closest to sea level? So the one that's closest to sea level, what is sea level? You have to know that first. Depth is how deep. So which one of these is closest to sea level? So how far is the sunken ship from sea level? Sea level is what? 0. That's the first thing you need to know. Sea level is 0. So how far, so you can use absolute value since we're trying to figure out how far these values are away from 0. So the absolute value of -12 is equal to 12. This one is the greatest depth because it's the deepest. So it's the greatest depth. Then we want the rock, we will use the absolute value of -2. Since we're trying to figure out how far they are away from 0, we're using absolute value because absolute value means distance away from 0. So the absolute value of -2 is equal to 2. So the rock is 2 units or 2 yards away from 0. The treasure chest, we're trying to figure out how far it's away from sea level, which is 0. So we would do the absolute value of -10, which equals 10, which is 10 units away from 0. And the boat dock, we will use the absolute value of 3, which is 3 units away. So it says, which object is closest to sea level? Explain your answer. So the object closest to sea level is the rock because it's only 2 units away from sea level, where the other one is 3, 10, and 12. So we're going to say the rock is closest to sea level. And then it says explain. So we need to give a reason for why we said what we said. All right, so the rock is closest to sea level because the absolute value of -2 is 2 units away from sea level, which is 0, when compared to the absolute value of -12, which is 12 units away from sea level, -10, which is 10 units away from sea level, and 3, the boat dock, which is 3 units away from 0. So that's the one that's closest. All right, so now we want to plot a point at the absolute value of -3 on the number line below. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what is the absolute value of -3. The absolute value of -3 is 3, and +3 is 3 units to the right of 0. So this is going to be the location for the absolute value of -3. Notice that it's on the right side of 0 because it's value. You're plotting the value. So the value of the absolute value of -3 is 3, so you will put that point on the positive side of 0. Yes, -3 is to the left of 0, but you're plotting the absolute value of -3. So make sure you keep that in mind for your test. All right, moving on. Which of the following, so this is 6.NS.C.7d, which of the following situations would be the inequality x is greater than -10 apply? All right, so the length of a snake is fewer than 10 inches long. So the length of the snake is going to be our variable, which is unknown. The length of the snake is fewer than, so that means it's saying is less than 10 inches long. So we want to look at what we just wrote for that inequality and compare it to the inequality that's here. So we're looking for our unknown to be greater than -10. So we're not going to pick this one. We're actually going to eliminate it. The next one, the temperature outside is warmer. So the temperature outside is warmer than 10 degrees below 0. So the temperature outside, our value for x is, which is going to be the temperature. So x is the temperature outside, must be warmer, and warmer is going to be greater than 10 degrees below sea level, below 0, 10 degrees below 0. So that would be -10, and that's actually the one that we're looking for. What does the C represent? What is the inequality for C? It says Drake's bedroom is more than 10 feet tall. So in this case, what is the unknown, the variable? X. X is going to represent Drake's bedroom, and it must be more than, which means X is greater than, his bedroom must be greater than, and then the number to represent 10 feet tall is +10. So because there is no negative sign in front of the 10, we will not pick this one. The next one, Miss Young's apartment is above the 10th floor. So what does X represent in this situation? X represents the apartment, her apartment floor. And then it says it is above, so that means her apartment floor must be higher than, which is greater than, the 10th floor. So on the other side, we would put greater than the 10th floor. And that's that one. So we're not going to pick that one because we're looking for the value of X, the unknown, to be greater than the opposite of 10, which is -10. All right, the next one, describe a real world situation in which the inequality below applies. So we have M is less than -12. So you're going to write your own. I'm going to give you an example. So my example would be, my friend has a bank account debt that's greater than $12. What is a debt that's greater than $12? A debt that's greater than $12 is like maybe -15. -15 is a number that's lower than -12. So the debt is $15. So M is going to be less than -12. All right, so which inequality describes a debt of more than $100? So in this case, the debt must be more than $100. So we're talking about debt, so the number to represent that is -100. So we're looking for a value that's going to, a debt that's more than that. So think of a debt that's more than more than $100. So let's -200. So -400, -150. So all of these values represent a debt that's more than a debt of $100. So the value D must be lower than -100, which is going to be A. Miss Fuller's account balance is represented by V in the inequality below. -45 is greater than B. And we should all know another way to write that is B is less than -45. So B in this case is represented by what? B is going to be the account balance, Miss Fuller's account balance. It's be lower than $45, which means that it's a debt that's greater than $45. If it's the actual number is lower than $45, the debt is greater, because remember, debt is a negative value, so you want to use absolute value to represent the number. So we're looking for a number. We're looking for a number that's less than -45, or you want to look for a debt, since debt represents a negative situation. We want to look for a debt that's greater than $45. A debt that's greater than $45 is a number that's lower than negative 45. All right, so if we look at A, it says Miss Fuller has a debt that is less than $45. If her debt was less than $45, then it would be a number that's greater than negative 45, not a number that's less than 45, right? A debt that's less than $45, that means the debt is going to be a higher number than negative 45, which is not the inequality that we have here. A debt that's less than negative 45 will be like negative 30 is lower. You owe less money. $0, not owing money at all. So this one is incorrect. The next one, Miss Fuller has a debt that is greater than $45. So the amount that she owes is greater than negative 45. So that's the one that we want to select as our answer choice. And the next one, Miss Fuller has more than $45 in her account. If she had more than $45, we wouldn't see negative numbers at all. We would see her bank account balance is greater than 0. So that is not the correct answer. C is incorrect. Eliminate. And then the next one, Miss Fuller's debt is decreasing each month. We don't have the evidence to support that claim, so we would just cancel that one out altogether. Some confusion can arise when we get with A and B because we're talking about negative numbers. It's just something that you have to practice, okay? And the number that's lower is going to be a number that's further left on a number line. So if you're trying to get a number right here, you're trying to get a number for her account balance that's less than negative 45, we need a number that's to the left, which represents a greater debt because it's further left, further negative. So it's going to have a greater absolute value. So the negative number with the greatest absolute value has the greatest debt.